Welcome, everyone. My name is Jim Jesselnick. I'm the immediate past president of the Golf Heritage Society. I've been a member since the year 2000, and we're really pleased to have everybody on the call tonight. We started the Grand Zoom series a while back, and we've been fortunate enough to have a real wide variety of speakers come on, share their background, share their passion about the history of the game. I would like to give a little shout out to George, our technical guru, because without him, this would be a very daunting task. So namaste, George, namaste. And I also want to give a big shout out to Mel Lucas. Mel is on our call. Mel is not only one of our past presidents, but also a past president of the Golf Course Superintendents Association. And then another individual who's on the call, some of you may not have seen the introduction, is Ben Ellis. Ben is a golf course superintendent at Andrews Air Force Base. So if you want to get a free ride on the presidential jet, just reach out to Ben. He'll kind of tell you that it's never going to happen, right, Ben? But I also want to mention that he has a book out called The First 100 Days, Becoming a Golf Course Superintendent and Living to Tell the Story. And it's available on Amazon, and maybe later, Ben, you could tell us a little bit about the book, etc.
Sounds good.
But tonight, we are really pleased to have a gentleman that I met last year. His name is John Miller. Lives in Columbus, Ohio, and John has a very unique position and has been very happy to share his story with us. So let's go ahead and get started. And by the way, if you have a question, go ahead and either send me a message in the chat, put your hand up like this, and I'll call on you. But there will be time when we get to the end too for questions. So John, welcome. Can you tell us a little bit about your background and why you chose this profession?
Yeah, thanks, Jim, and welcome everyone. And I hope you're all having a good evening, or depending upon where you are, probably maybe even a really late evening or early morning. So, but welcome. It was really interesting. I think I was kind of born to be into the game of golf. When I was 2 years old, my grandfather was superintendent at the London Country Club here just outside of Columbus. And he was superintendent there for 40 years. But when I was, my mom and dad were both working. So I actually was raised during the day by my grandparents on the London Country Club. When I was a baby, they used to cut fairways with real gang mowers that were pull behinds. Not anything like what we have today, but it was actually pulled with the Jeep, a four-wheel drive Jeep. And in between the seats of the Jeep, my grandmother had made a little area for me as a baby to lay in that little area between the seats while she was mowing fairways, and my grandfather was doing other things on the golf course. So yeah, I was there every day with them, and so it was kind of in my blood. My father ended up being the superintendent of that golf course. And when I was 14 years old, I went to work as the night waterman at that golf course under a different individual who happened to be the superintendent at the time. Decided I really liked being out on the golf course in that capacity, and I ended up going to the Ohio State University and got my degree in agronomy, and actually went back and was the superintendent at the London Country Club to start out with. So at that point, took a job a few years later as an assistant at Hickory Hills over in the Columbus area, private club there. Was there for 1 year, and a gentleman named Herb Bash, who had Bash Recreation, big driving range up in the Columbus area, decided he wanted to build a golf course between Columbus and Springfield, Ohio. And at that point, I was lucky enough to get the position to do the construction and the grow-in of that golf course. It was an all bent grass golf course, daily fee, high-end daily fee. And at that point, that was just kind of the beginning. It was the late 80s, and that was just kind of the beginning of the high-end daily fee golf courses coming to light. From there, I went down 5 years later, did another construction and grow in Centerville, Ohio, of a municipal golf course. That too was a high-end golf course. There had been a boom in the building industry, but in Southwest Ohio, municipalities were getting into the golf business, and they were all high-end clubs. They were trying to compete with each other, and Centerville being kind of just, they took the wait and see attitude. They wanted to do it the biggest, the best of all of them, which they did. And the golf course today is still doing well. I was there for 15 years. That time, in the middle part of the 15 years, we ended up doing 5 PGA Tour events. At that time, it was the buy.com. It was Nike, then buy.com. And then there was one other one. And so we basically, in the 5-year period, we changed names of the actual tournament 3 times. So there's a lot of signage change going on. But at that time, I was honored enough to be able to work with 5 different agronomists from the PGA Tour. Got to know them all really well. And at the same time, started teaching a class for GCSAA on tournament preparation, because they had never had a class like that up until that time. And I actually taught it with the gentleman who was the vice president of agronomy for the PGA Tour at the time, a guy named John Scott. And John and I did the class, and one evening John had asked me, he said, would you ever be interested in doing what we do? And I said, yeah. I said, I really would. And he said, well, I don't have any positions right now. He says, but I will definitely keep that in mind. Within 6 months, the LPGA decided that they needed a tour agronomist. And so I applied for the job, and obviously I was lucky enough to get the position, and haven't looked back since. So it's been a great adventure, and we'll get into a little bit about what I do here. And I think George has got some slides that he's going to throw up there, and one more. So I do get my own cart with my name on it occasionally when I'm on site. So, but I've had the privilege to get my face on a few magazines, but more so than anything, I've really got to work with and meet a lot of the players, talk with a lot of our LPGA players. Unfortunately, we lost a few great ones here over the past few years, and Kathy Whitworth being one here just recently. But a lot of our historic players that really were the ones who were the predecessors and have made the LPGA what it is today, we're losing them pretty quickly right now. And so it's, if you're around any of them, if you know any of them, by all means, take time to say hello to them and spend a little time with them, because they are a wealth of knowledge. Lorena Ochoa, she was phenomenal, especially I got to know her and talk with her and spend time with her in her heyday when she was the best player in the world. Just as polite, nice, sweet young lady as you could imagine. And what a player. To see her and Annika battle was, it was like watching Jack Nicklaus and Tom Weiskopf in their heydays when they were battling. I still remember some of those battles that happened. You can go to the next one if you would. Paula Kramer. Yeah, Paula at the same time, the Pink Panther, she was playing very well, well recognized. The fans loved her. And it was funny. I tell a quick story here. We were at an event, and as a matter of fact, it was up in Toledo. And my dad had walked up, and my dad was a big autograph hound. He worked Muirfield. He loved to get autographs. And Paula was walking in, and her parents were walking behind her. And instead of asking Paula for her autograph, my dad actually asked Paula's mom for her autograph, and her mom looked and said, "Are you kidding me?" But she did give it. So it was interesting. You can go to the next one if you would. So I've been fortunate. I've traveled places that I never thought that I would ever go, countries I thought I would never see. This happens to be just a shot from Diamond Head over towards Waikiki Beach in Hawaii. You get up there and you get that shot. And you can go to the next one if you would. This was actually southern Utah. I was just driving up to a at that time, it was a Symetra golf course that we play in St. George, Utah. And the outcroppings of the rocks are up there are just phenomenal, in the mountain sites. And, the entrance to Zion is like 30 miles from where we played. So I was able to go up there. So, things like that you never thought you would be able to see. You can go to the next one if you would, please. And then, of course, flying back one afternoon, I just happened to be able to look down as we were coming into John Glenn Airport and got an aerial view of the horseshoe where the Buckeyes play. So I had to get that one, and I've actually cropped that one and brought it up, and it's actually downstairs in my Ohio State room. So when we played up at Inverness, the famous Hinkle tree, and there's a stone marker right there that talks about the way that Hinkle played the 8th hole by playing it over into the 17th fairway and then onto the green and shortened it. And that marker is still there, and you go around and play some of these historic golf courses, and you get to see some things like that are really, really neat, and little bits of history that you witnessed, but over years you forgot about it, and all of a sudden there it is right in front of you again. So you can go to the next one, George. So what do I do when I'm out on the golf course? Well, we take a look at trying to make sure that the golf course is in the proper condition that it needs to be in to play a professional ladies tournament. We're basically setting the golf course up for the best ladies in the world to play. So we got to make sure that, number one, the conditions are right, but number two, we're also challenging them. A lot of the things that we do, protecting tees, because a lot of our yardages are right in yardages where a lot of the membership play comes from. Resort play might come from. We typically will play our golf courses about anywhere from 64 to 6,800 yards, depending upon the golf course, the elevation, that type of thing. So, and you can see, I mean, some of these tees, this one's not too bad, but I mean, there's been some tees where they basically can get chopped all the way across. The other thing that we take a look at in the teeing areas, as you can see here, this is a par 3 that goes downhill. It's actually in South Korea. We'll have them take a little bit of those shrubs down just a little bit to make sure that the players, when they're standing on that tee, can see all of the entire green. And then the hole in white, if you're playing tournament golf, and there's even a lot of the private clubs now, sometimes the daily fee, sometimes the resort courses will paint the white around the cups. There's also some plastic liners now that go all the way to the top that kind of mimic the paint, so you don't have to paint every day. We prefer the paint on tour. We've had some issues with the plastic liners, balls hitting them and popping out, and we want to make sure that that does not happen. But there's an art to it. So obviously, if we're on the golf course doing setup every day, and we would happen to see something like this, we would actually have the golf course staff come back and touch that up and make it look the way that it should, because it should just be a solid white all the way around the top part of the cup there. So bunkers are a huge issue. That's probably what most golf courses spend a lot of man hours in the bunkers. We do as well. And the argument is, well, why spend so much time and money in bunkers when they're supposed to be a hazard anyway? But when you're playing for the money that these players are playing, they expect them to be manicured. They expect them to be the way that they should, so that every player has the same ability or the same chance to get out of the bunker. And then it's up to their individual ability to be able to do the shot and perform the way that shot should be performed. So old hole plugs. I mean, this is something that we fight constantly when I'm doing my advanced work. And I typically will go into a golf course about 6 weeks prior to the event, if it's an event that we've done year after year. If it's a first time event, I'll make usually a trip in as soon as we know that we're going to have the event there. And then again, 6 weeks prior, and possibly in between if necessary. So, but old hole plugs are really, really something that we watch for, especially if it becomes a problem, or it's going to be in a holeable or cuppable location for the tournament. So, disease, when we look at all types of disease, and this is actually one that actually sprung up in the middle. When I was in South Korea last year, the fairways were fantastic. Zoysia grass fairways were fantastic. We came in one morning, it was actually Thursday morning, and temperatures had just dropped just enough, and we got in that perfect zone, and we had a little bit of breakthrough in a couple fairways of some zoysia patch. So, and this one, this is actually out in Southern California, where we played our Kia event. Thursday morning, we come in, we're doing our setup, go to one of the tournament tees, and we got this little white powder on there. And somebody had done a baby reveal on the tee with one of the exploding golf balls on our tournament tee the night before. So fortunately, it was just powder. We were able to blow it off, but sometimes you never know what you're going to come into. So this is actually our Solheim Cup site for 23 over in Spain. And as you can see, the fairway looks very, very dry, but the fairways actually have a hydrophobic soil in them, and they dry out very, very rapidly, and it's difficult to get the moisture reestablished. So this is basically just a dry fairway. And as they get into their dry summers, it's this way. As soon as they get back into the rainy season, it greens right back up. We're trying to work on some different things that we can do to make sure that we're ahead of this, because we play there in September. So it's going to be right after their long, hot summer that they have there. So we want to make sure that we're experiencing some green. If you go to the next slide, you can see that basically they have a nice top part of the soil is very, very good, but it's the bottom part, and you can see the roots coming out into the bottom part of the clay. So it was really just a humus sand mix that was put on top of clay soil, and the roots actually get down. They grow so good through the top part, it just gets down into the soil. And so that's something that we're working on, and we've got a pretty good game plan, we think. We'll see how we look midsummer when I'm back over there. So this one is actually one in France, and actually experienced some of this wild pig damage. You can go to the next one if you would. It doesn't take very long for the wild pigs to destroy a tee, a fairway, green surrounds, whatever they can get. You can go to the next one if you would, George. And then obviously this was the morning before the first round. So fortunately, it was late in the I think it was on the 15th fairway. So we actually had some time to get the staff out there and get it put back together. The players didn't know any different. And the fortunate thing was it was in between landing areas. So it worked out okay. But next one, obviously when I'm out doing my work, and part of that work is to establish cutting heights, and we have ranges of cutting heights that we will look at for different grasses, whether it's northern grasses, southern grasses. Our green speeds are determined when I go in and do my 6-week visit. Green speeds are based upon the time of year that we're playing in an area, the undulations of the green, the size of the greens. And we typically will look somewhere between 10 and 12 on the stemp meter, is what the range that we would like to be in. Occasionally we will go outside that, but not very often. We did when we played at Mission Hills. We played our, it used to be the Craft Nabisco, then became the A&A. So it was our first major championship of the year. They had extremely large greens, some undulation in them, but because of the size and the mildness of some of the undulation, we were able to push those up to 13, and the players really liked it. So it was a true major championship. Obviously we encounter different settings. You can see the wooded area back there, the shade. This is midday, and so that area over there has been shaded almost all day. So shade is something that we deal with. And when I go in and do an initial site visit, those are the things that we look at. And so we try to work with the clubs closely. I work with the superintendent and try to improve, anything that we can to make the superintendent's life easier. And then also, which obviously would improve the condition of the turf for not only for the tournament, but also for the members. So this is an area, it's actually up in New Jersey, and it's kind of a bay area. We play right on the bay, and you can see how much the rough is baled there. Well, when they get nor'easters coming in, because it's a bay right off the ocean, the nor'easters come in, it pushes the salt water actually up onto the golf course, And when it gets up onto the golf course, a lot of times it can get trapped there. And we've got a couple of areas, one fairway in particular, where we ended up finally raising the fairway to solve the problem of the salt water coming in with some of these nor'easters that happen.
Wow.
This one was Dallas 2 years ago. When we had the big cold air mass that kind of moved across the entire country, Dallas experienced temperatures of -2 degrees. It was a very quick, fast, hard freeze. Got down to -2 degrees, and then they stayed in the 20s for over a week. And their dominant turf down there was Bermuda. And obviously the Bermuda does not like temperatures like that. I got the call from the superintendent when I was actually in California at the end of March. He said, we've got some real winter damage. He said, we need to come take a look. This was the first week of April. I went in, took a look at it, and this is just one fairway. If you can imagine, about 16 fairways look like this. Par threes were included. You can go to the next one. They did, fortunately, tarp their greens, and you can kind of see that nice kind of square tarp there, or kind of square green area is where the tarp was tied down, and that was kind of the corner of the tarp. So the greens were fine. It was the areas surrounding and the areas that were on higher knobs were really, really bad. We actually ended up going into the driving range because it happened to be the same Bermuda. Went into the driving range, made our own sprigs, and actually ended up sprigging a lot of the golf course because the event was in September. So we actually spent all summer growing it back in. You can go to the next one, George, if you would. This is actually, it's a 36-hole facility. The interesting thing here, all the little lime green stuff around is all damaged to this particular golf course. It was actually a different variety of grass that was on this green as on the ones that we played. But the area that's where it's green is actually where they had laid the pin down, and the cover was put over top of the pin. And that area, because evidently I think it was just the pin gave just enough airspace there that area did not get affected when everything else around it did. So just something little like that. It's amazing how, something like that can happen. So you don't see things like that every day.
So John, let's stop there for a second. I mean, we saw the other pictures that you showed, the pig damage and some of the other ones. This was major here. So
it was. Yes.
At what point do you guys issue a go, no go, and how close were you to that particular point for this course?
When we went in and first took a look at it, when I got there in April, and our event again was over Labor Day that year, sat down with the superintendent. We talked about a game plan. How much sod can you get? We basically stripped their driving range. We talked about identifying the areas where we really needed to concentrate our efforts. The next 4 weeks, he did that. Temperatures improved, and we got some recovery. I went back, as I said, 4 weeks later. We took a look at it. At that same time, we were starting to explore other sites just in case, to have a backup plan. And we would have needed to make the call probably at least 8 weeks prior because of all the logistics, everything that would have had to change, especially if we could not play in that city and we had to go to a different city.
Right.
So,
thank you.
Yeah. Now, interestingly, this is the nursery at that golf course, and they had both varieties of grass on the nursery. The one in the back half is the grass that we played on there, and in the forefront is the grass that was on the other 18 holes of the golf course. So we saw the same thing in the nursery that we saw out on the golf course. So it's really interesting.
Wow.
So, and then to beat that same golf course, about 6 weeks after that happened, they ended up with a flood. So, but you can see the grass is already starting to improve. So we had made some really good strides by that particular time. You can go to the next one if you would. And this is actually what most of it looked like when we actually played during the Labor Day weekend. You can see there's a lot of recovery. The superintendent and his staff, I mean, you just can't imagine all the work, the hours that they put in. It was just phenomenal. what they did to that golf course in the short period of time to get it ready to play. It wasn't ideal, but we were able to play. We played the ball down a majority of the areas. We did have a few that we identified, and we played the ball up in those areas just because they weren't 100%. But overall, it turned out to be very good. This was actually this past fall down in Cincinnati, Kenwood Country Club. We had a major rain event come in, and it kind of sat there, and we ended up getting 7 inches of rain advance week. So this was actually taken the Tuesday, which was would have been our practice day of tournament week, because we had another downpour come in after that 7 inches the week before. So, the greens were just saturated. They couldn't take any more water. We did not get any drying conditions because it was just cloud cover. And we were trying to figure out what we were going to do there. And we were able to get the water off. You can actually see the little green bubble there. There was so much water that we were starting to get little bubbles rising up, so we were concerned that, were we going to be able to play? Were we able to provide a good golf course? As you can imagine, the fairways were just as wet as the greens, or wetter. And we ended up getting the play. We ended up playing the ball up all 4 days, but we got the golf tournament in, no damage to the golf course. We actually had the greens to speed. The roughs were growing out of control for the most part. We couldn't get the mowers out to top them off until the weekend. But we were able to pull the tournament off. And I mean, these are just some of the things that, obviously we have 99% of the time, everything is great, goes according to plan, and it's really good. I'm showing you some of the outliers that we typically get, time to time. So yeah. A lot of the tools that I use, and this actually, it's kind of interesting. The Lang penetrometer on the left was what we used to use years ago. Actually, when I started this, that was the only device that we had for measuring firmness. And that's the one on the left. Then we went to the True Firm, and the USGA came up with the Clegg hammer, and the True Firm is kind of I guess for lack of a better word, a knockoff of the Clegg hammer. But it's interesting. There's a little computer there in the top, and you drop, it's got a rod, you drop the rod, it's got a set height, it measures the impression, and then it gives you a number. Now that number doesn't really mean anything to most people, but it allows you to know 2 things. Number one, if you're doing it on all the greens, are the greens consistent? Are you getting a number that's fairly consistent? And then number 2, as you measure them throughout the week and advance week, are you getting firmer as you go? So, and we've kind of switched since, and we use the method, the one in the middle is called the ball drop method. It's just a ball bearing that's kind of similar to the size of a golf ball, but the weight of it kind of mimics about an 8-iron shot coming in, maybe a 9-iron shot coming into the green, so that ball imprint goes in. And then again, we just use, with the micrometer there, we just use the measure the depth of the dimple that we make in the green, and that gives us a firmness. So PGA Tour uses, they went through the exact same process. They went to the ball drop method a little quicker than I did, because they have 8 agronomists on tour. And so they had 8 different True Firms, and they were getting all kinds of numbers. They couldn't correlate them. So they went to the ball drop because they can correlate those. So yeah. Next one. So the last 2 tools that I carry with me, the stent meter, obviously on the left, and then the moisture meter on the right. Every superintendent anymore has a moisture meter. Usually most of them have multiple moisture meters, so they have their staff and irrigation folks use the multimeter or the moisture meters as they do their daily management. And they kind of go around. A lot of them will manage to a number. They find out what their wilt point is of their greens, and they manage about 5 to 6% above that, and then adjust during the day by hand watering. The moisture meters have really allowed us to be good stewards of the environment and managing water so much better than what we used to do before. And we have a lot of tools to do this, help us do this. So And obviously the stent meter, it's the same thing as the firmness meter. It's used to make sure that you are reaching your goals, but then also that your greens are consistent on that golf course. And just a kind of a shot of the screen.
Before we
Yep.
move off of that, because I know this is sort of interesting, and it was mentioned in the article about you, about how you have to get through airports with this
Oh, yes, yes.
stuff. Tell us
So,
about that.
so when I first started traveling, I was able to take the stent meter on the plane with me because it had its own little tube, and I could take the little tube on. And the second year I started to take it on, and TSA said, nope, can't take that on. It's a weapon. And so from that point on, then I ended up buying a case. So now I have a Pelican hard case, and because the stent meter doesn't break down, the Pelican hard case has to be big enough to handle it. So I got one big enough to handle all the equipment, and it basically looks like a rifle case. So every time I check in at the airport now, they're asking me, well, yeah, you know, what's in the case? Do you have a firearm in the case? Well, no, I've got testing tools for golf courses in there. So, you know, that becomes a little bit of a slowdown, but and it typically the case will get checked every time it gets screened. I look at the little TSA tag in the bag when I get back home. So, yeah. So the moisture meter, this is just a little shot of the screen so you can see that it will take a moisture reading at the spot where you're standing, and then it will also give you the average as you go around the green. And you can see 4% moisture is not very much. Typically, we're going to see golf course greens in somewhere between 10 and 20%, depending upon the makeup of the green, the environment that we're in. But you know, I forgot to put the picture in of what the actual turf looked like, but you can see up above the moisture meter, it's pretty brown around there, so it's very dry. And I threw this in equipment. This was actually a golf cart that they issued all the rules officials and myself when we were in Korea. You know, sometimes it just looked like the little old jalopy that's just sitting there. Just a shot because, like I said, a lot of times there's a lot that we work through, but I'm fortunate to work with really, really good superintendents all over the world. And this is just a shot from Mission Hills when we played there. You know, and then obviously you get the snow cap on the mountains in the background, and it's, you know, 85, 90 degrees down on the floor there. But it's just, it's spectacular what the superintendents could do nowadays with the tools that they have. And this was up at Inverness when we did the Solheim Cup there, and you can see how many staff members they have on this golf course. You know, John Zimmers and his staff, they were phenomenal to work with, probably one of the best crews I've ever worked with. We don't get this everywhere that we go, but we get it a lot of places that we go. You know, most maintenance staff, you go to an 18-hole golf course, you know, they're probably somewhere in the 12 to 18 staff range. I think we were about almost hitting 100 staff members for the Solheim Cup at Inverness. So, wow. And sometimes it's out of the superintendent's hand. You can see the blue dots, there were blue dashes there that would mark where the irrigation line was. And this was actually at CME this just past November. The TV tower on the 18th hole went up, and they didn't pay attention to where the blue lines were, and they put the stake right through the irrigation line at the back of the green, the 18th green. It does happen. Some other things that we've encountered. This is our major championship over in Evian in France. And you can see the line in the greens. I got an email from the superintendent and a call from the director of golf. The French government had decided that they changed the law, and that if you had an area that you were spraying that was within 5 meters of a body of water, that could it was no longer suitable and had to be changed. So even though it had been there for 45, 50 years, all of a sudden the French government says, nope, it's not good. You've got to change it. And so we were playing there in July, and the area that you see there in orange was too close to the blue line down there. So we had to make some changes, and you know, we looked at a number of different things, but what we ended up doing was just moving the mow line up to the top of the orange line onto the green. So we just made the green a little bit smaller, and that was acceptable to the government. That's all that we had to change. So at least we didn't have to do any construction there, but it's really, sometimes when you're working with different governments and things, some of the things that they make you do that, you just never thought you'd ever have to do that, especially since something had been there that long. So, I just threw this one in there, just a quick little shot of all 5 major trophies in one spot at one time. And this was over at Evian. So at our Monday championship there now. And then occasionally in my travels, I do get a beautiful sunset picture. And this was actually down on Oahu when I was out in Hawaii. So you get to see those every once in a while. So, yeah.
Excellent. Wow, you covered a lot of territory in a short period of time, John. We really appreciate it. We got one question that came in, and we'll have you answer that. The question is, what is sprigging and how is it done?
Okay, so for southern grasses, you don't have seed, although now there is one Bermuda that there is a seed for, but in times before, and depending upon what variety, most southern grasses do not have seed. So what you do is you actually go in and you harvest plant tissue from existing turf. And it's the stolons that are there. And basically you take those and you lay them down on the ground and you start to water them and they start to grow. So if you were in northern grasses, you could establish from seed, but unfortunately with the southern grasses, you can't do that.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. And I just mentioned a couple other things here, just to give you
Sure.
a real brief of where we're going. Last year, we had 34 events. I covered all 34 events. Now, I did not travel to every country that we do. We actually will have 13 countries this year. And we'll have 36 events this year because we have Solheim Cup again this year in Spain. And we have our International Crown is back at Harding Park out in California. So those are 2 additional events that we didn't have last year. But I will be covering every one of those. There's a few countries that I'll just be sending an email to because Singapore and Thailand, the golf courses are really phenomenal. And we typically I don't have to go there. It's just an email, how are things? And they'll send us back. And I actually know the superintendents that are at those facilities. So not really too worried about those. For the first year or first time in history, the ladies this year will be playing for over $100 million in prize money. So we've come a long way. I think when I started, we were in 2007, when I became the agronomist, I think we were in the low $40 million range for total purse for the ladies for the year. So, yeah. And then I also take care of the Epson tour, which is our developmental tour. Kind of like what the Corn Ferry Tour is to the men. And it has 22 sites on it. I will typically visit about 4 to 5 of those sites a year, in addition to the ones that I visit for the PGA Tour. And then obviously I'm in contact with all the other superintendents as well. So when I'm not out traveling, I'm either on the phone or sending emails.
Got it. So questions from the floor?
Just, I'm in Sydney where it's hot and humid during summer.
Yes.
Your view on POA versus bent greens?
Mm-hmm. I'll tell you, I think a lot depends upon the environment in which you're growing in. If you're out on the west coast of America, California, up there, the POA does very, very well. And it's very, very difficult to keep it out. So most of the superintendents there embrace it. They find ways to manage it and manage it very, very well. In France, where we play in France, they did a complete greens renovation. They were almost 100% POA on their greens there. And they were so in love with the way the POA was that they stripped the greens off, set the sod off to the side, redid the greens, and used that same sod to put it back on. So they went right back to POA greens. I think a lot depends upon the climate that you're in. If you have or are approaching 40 to 50% POA, now you're in that situation where the superintendent is managing POA and bent both on the same green, and it's very, very difficult. So that's kind of where some of the superintendents can get themselves in a bit of a twist, is which one do they want to be the dominant grass. As far as playability goes, I mean, POA can be, especially like out on the West Coast, you get, Pebble Beach, Torrey Pines, some of those golf courses that have the POA greens, they manage them very, very well. And the players can putt on them. They get a bit bumpy in the afternoon. It's just the nature of the beast. But obviously, if I personally would much rather putt on bent grass greens, on pure bent grass greens. The hard thing is with the POA, the way that it is just being able to keep them that way once you get them. So,
Thanks.
First, John, I just want to say this is really fascinating as a player. I found your information really interesting. So I really appreciate you taking the time and sharing with us. I've got just a couple questions.
okay.
One, you mentioned earlier in your presentation about you said the setup and playability for the ladies tour. So other than maybe the obvious, maybe distances, are there other conditions that you would set up differently in the men's tour versus the women's tour?
Yeah, there are a little bit. The interesting thing about the ladies, we have ladies that can carry it, 245, 250 driving distance. They can hit it 300, and we have some that their carry is 210, 200. So we have some challenges when we set up golf courses for the ladies if there's forced carries involved. The men, that's not really an issue with. But we do come across some golf courses where they'll have a particularly large area of rough between the tees and the beginning of the fairway, especially if we're playing in the desert. Sometimes there could be a lot of desert skate between the tees and the fairways. So that becomes a bit of an issue. We got to make sure we get them on the right set of tees. And then the other thing is, if we get into dog legs, making sure that we get the ladies into the position, the correct tee, so that their drive distance gets them to a spot where they actually can have a look at the green, make sure that they can navigate the dog leg properly. So the men, it's not really that big of an issue the way that they hit the ball now. So, yeah.
Okay, I appreciate that. And my other question, if you'll allow, is that I don't know how many staff do you, I'm assuming you have like a traveling staff that goes with you.
I believe it or not, I am the only agronomist that the LPGA Tour has. I do all the agronomy stuff myself, but I am surrounded by a fabulous team of rules officials and support staff from headquarters at the LPGA. So while I do a lot of the road stuff myself, I do have good support staff that work with me. So
when you get there, I guess here's my question is there commingling, or how much commingling is going on with the staff that is always at that particular venue, that course, and the staff that is with the LPGA?
There is at the upper level. So with the superintendent and myself, we're meeting 2-3 times a day. Typically we'll meet in the evening to lay out our game plan for the next day. We'll typically meet, right after setups finished to talk about what we're going to do in the afternoon. Again, we'll get together sometime mid-afternoon prior to the staff going back out in case conditions have changed. But then it's pretty much the superintendent communicating with their staff. The lead rules official will work with myself and the superintendent should something come up from a rule standpoint that needs to be addressed. If it was when they were doing setup, obviously we're looking at some of the things I showed you, the hole in white and the bunkers and things like that. And if all of a sudden we start seeing themes, then obviously we're making notes. And then when I have my meeting with the superintendent, those issues will come up and we'll make sure we get them corrected for the next session. So.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
I think there was one or two other people that had a question. James Fitzgerald, go ahead.
John, thank you. To follow up on Eric's question, you mentioned the green speeds you shoot for 10 to 12.
Uh-huh.
Are there any other conditions like firmness of the greens and the fairways that you shoot for to allow for rollout? And if there are there any issues you have with the membership and the superintendent of each club? Do you have any conflicts with what you're looking to see for the event that may not be what they want for the membership?
That is a great question, and the answer is yes. So we typically like the golf course to be firm and fast, and for it to play that way. We like for approaches to be as firm as the fairways and to match the firmness of the greens, so that way we can do front hole locations, and players don't have to worry about the greens being firm and then the approaches being soft, so that if we do have those front hole locations, they can actually hit the ball on the approach and it will release up onto the green. So that becomes an issue. And a lot of times drying the golf course down during advance week to get the conditions that we need during tournament week does not sit well with the membership or the daily fee player, or even sometimes the owners. And I remember when we played in Mexico, the Mexican officials of the golf course did not want the golf course to be brown at all. It had to be green. The superintendents had to manage it being green. And there were times when you walk out there and basically water's coming up around your shoes, because that's the way that they wanted it down there, because to them, green was good. And it took forever for us to get them to the point where they would let us dry the golf course down so that we could at least get some type of roll off the fairways. But yes, we want the golf course to play firm and fast. That way the players, if there's a dog leg, if there's movement in the fairway, the players have to negotiate that movement, because the ball's going to run out. And if they don't, they could find themselves in a bunker, they could find themselves in a rough, because they didn't shape the shot the right way, because the golf course was not firm or was too firm. So
Great. Thank you.
Mhm.
Well, Steve Schlossman, go ahead. You have a question.
Hi, I was just wondering whether you have a clear role to play at the U.S. Women's Open, or does the USGA take that over entirely?
The USGA takes that one over entirely. So
I see, okay.
there are two. And when we play the, it's the AIG, but basically the Women's British, the RNA take care of that one as well.
Okay.
So, yeah.
I also was wondering, does anybody, I was fascinated by the measuring tool, as primitive as that earlier one may have been,
Mhm.
to measure firmness. Is there ever any discussion about communicating that information to the players at the beginning of a round, or do you take it at the beginning of every round?
Well, actually, we take it every day,
Yeah.
both during the morning round setup and then in the afternoon. So we're constantly tracking to see if we're getting firmer or softer. But the firmness, it's not, that information is not given to the players. The players know at the beginning of the week what our green speed range is.
Right.
And as long as we stay within that range, players are happy. But as far as the firmness, the moisture, that type of thing, that's more for us to manage the golf course, to give them consistent conditions. So we really don't share that information with the players, because to them, it would just be a number and they wouldn't understand what it was really
Right.
for.
Right.
So.
Just if I can sneak in one final one,
Mhm.
with all the storms happening on the West Coast right now,
Mhm.
are there any predictable outcomes that might affect the Women's Open at Pebble Beach from this far out, or is it far enough out that you think they can repair anything they have to repair?
I think right now they're far enough out they can repair anything that they need to repair. The obvious thing that they would not be able to repair would be if an extremely large tree was damaged or toppled over. Obviously that can have a big impact on the way a hole plays. That would be the only thing. I mean, as far as a bunker being washed out, anything like that, that can all be repaired in pretty short time. So,
Thanks.
thank you.
Yeah, speaking of unusual situations, at the very beginning, for those of you who may not have been on, you showed a picture of Inverness and the plaque for the Hinkle tree.
Mhm.
Can you tell the people what exactly happened there? Because it's a fascinating, quick story.
Yeah. So during, and I forget which event it was, I want to say it was, I can't remember if it was the Open that was there
Open.
or if it was
Is
the,
it open?
yeah. So Lon Hinkle, instead of playing the 8th hole the way it was set up to play, actually hit the ball over into the 17th fairway and had a lot shorter, straighter shot into the green on the 8th hole. And they came out the next day, and the members or someone had planted a tree there so that that shot was no longer available. So it's really, really kind of interesting as to you know, what the club did to make sure that they maintained the integrity of the golf hole. So.
Well, wasn't there another story like that where they planted a tree, but then a wind came in and blew it down, and so they didn't. Do you recall that? Does anybody on the call recall that story?
In 1921, Walter Hagen won the PGA, and at Inwood Country Club, he played the wrong. He was the only one played the wrong fairway. They put up a willow tree, and then and he said, like, these are the fastest growing trees I've ever seen. So he had the crowd rolling, and then apparently the next day or something blew down just in time for him to do it one more time. So something like that. So yeah, it's not the first time. How important is the practice green to you? Because there's nothing more frustrating than the practice green to stimp at 4 and the course stimps at 13.
That is,
It's really aggravating, and
yeah,
that's what we see.
Yep, that is one of the areas that we make sure that the entire practice facility. So not only the putting green, but the practice bunkers, the chipping greens, everything has to mimic what's actually out on the golf course that the players are going to play on. So we really spend a lot of time trying to make sure that those are dialed in as well as the golf course being dialed in. So, yeah.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
It looks like Burns got his hand up.
First of all, John, thank you so much. It was fascinating. I think the wild pig story took the prize. I've been playing golf for 62 years, and although I don't look it, and on my Muni in Pittsburgh, when I was a kid, we saw most of those conditions you showed early in my career. Now it's amazing.
Mm-hmm.
The super, even at the Munis, takes such care and conditioning of the golf courses. It's just a delightful experience.
Yes.
How'd that happen?
Basically, the innovations that the manufacturers have come up with, the things that we're able to make the machinery do now, and the tools that the superintendents have and the way they're able to use them and the knowledge that they have all come together and allowed superintendents to produce conditions that, I mean, when I started in the business, when I was that night waterman, I mean, we were mowing greens at 3/16 of an inch and some places even 1/4 of an inch at the time. And now we're mowing greens, believe it or not, there's some superintendents who are mowing greens at 0.075 of an inch.
Wow.
Yeah. I mean, it's just amazing that the equipment that they could do these things with. So,
Wow, good stuff.
Yeah.
Well, we'll be at the GCSAA event. We'll have a team there.
fantastic.
And now we'll be ready to rock and roll. We'll be all knowledgeable.
Oh
about
yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
being able to compliment people and ask intelligent questions. Thanks
Great.
to you.
Great. Well, you'll see a lot of all the tools that I showed. You'll probably see there because they're all going to be on display.
It'll be great.
Yeah.
So earlier I introduced, I'm not sure if everybody was on the call, but Ben Ellis is joining us tonight. He is the superintendent at Andrews Air Force Base, and he wrote this book, The First 100 Days Becoming a Golf Course Superintendent and Living to Tell the Story. John, I'm sure you could have probably written a couple chapters in that book. So Ben, tell us about the book, just briefly. What is it all about?
Briefly, it's me taking over as a golf superintendent at Andrews, which is at the time it was the largest military golf course in the world, 54 holes of golf. And it's about the absolute extreme nightmare. Anything that could go wrong did go wrong. And now I was laughing at John's comment earlier. He's like, hey, most 18-hole courses have a staff of 12. I'm like, I wish I have a 36-hole course and a staff of 7. That includes me. Man, I wish I had 12. But it was an interesting book to write. It explains what goes on in our minds. What do golf superintendents go through day in, day out? What goes through our minds? Those tools that we use are in there too. But what goes through our minds? What are we looking at when we see a golf course? What goes through our home lives too? How does the jobs can take a big hit on our home lives because we're at the golf course so often. So it takes a lot of, it sees the golf in the golf world an entirely different viewpoint of kind of what goes through our mindset versus what somebody else just playing golf sees. And it's like, oh, there's a little bit more to this than maybe just what we think. It's like, oh, I learned about that. So it was quite interesting to write. And it was interesting how I actually left that golf course. I left Andrews, wrote the book, all new management came in, and now I'm actually back there. So it's been a big joke of, all right, the next one's coming. Next book's coming up, right?
Well, thank you for being on. Again, it's available on Amazon. Are you going to be in Orlando? Are you coming to Orlando for the show?
I am. I do plan to be there. I'll be there ahead of time for the Toro Golf Tournament, and then I'll be there for the entire conference. I should be.
So buy the book, show up, and Ben will be happy to autograph it for you, right, Ben?
I'll be there.
All right.
Hey, Jim, can I ask one final question while he's unmuting himself?
Sure. Go
Okay.
ahead.
You mentioned earlier, John, that there are things that the players of the course or that are members or the owners of the course, there's things that you guys have to do that they don't really appreciate. Are there things that you find consistently that that you have to do and maybe enjoy doing that maybe the LPGA players don't enjoy?
They're probably, if I had to say that there would be one thing, it would be the players are constantly asking me when I'm on site, are the greens going to get any faster? Now, some of them are asking that because they know that as we typically will do our procedures and course maintenance, the natural thing is for the golf course day after day to get just slightly quicker and the greens to get slightly quicker and slightly firmer. It's just a natural progression of mowing every day and rolling every day, and the two just kind of go hand in hand. But they will ask that. But what a lot of them will ask, oh, the greens seem a little bit slow today. So while we know we're in our target area, a lot of times they'll want them faster, but what they don't realize is they're in our target area, or we've set that target on that golf course because we want to make sure we can capture as many good hole locations as possible. And as we start to increase green speeds, especially if we've got undulations, we start to lose really good hole locations pretty quick. So, yeah.
What he would say is a couple things. One, we've got a winter show that's coming up February 17th and 18th in Columbus, Ohio. And so we would love to have any of you join us. Maybe less, you could fly over if you're not doing anything that weekend from Australia. We have our annual convention coming up in Lexington, Kentucky this coming October. It happens to be being held at the same time as the Keeneland races. So if you're a racehorse fan, you can kill two birds with one stone. And certainly anybody who's not a member, we would encourage you to join. We are a great group of people. John made the comment earlier that this job had allowed him to see people that he's never seen, visit places that he's never been to before, and learn things that he didn't know before. And that is exactly the mantra of the Golf Heritage Society. So John, thank you very much again from all of us for taking the time. It's been most enjoyable.
Thank you all. I've enjoyed it.
All right, take care.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Great,
right.
John.
All right.
Loved it.